Yeah, my roof fell off in a typhoon is a much different emergency priority than my faucet's leak.
Indeed.
So it always helps if you can prioritize them a little bit. Well, good evening, Sasebo. Good evening, sailors, Marines, and families of 7th Fleet and Navy Region Japan. This is Chaplain Lawrence again with another episode of Taps with Chaps. This is episode 13, and we're continuing our discussion on resiliency and support of our service members and our families. And I have with me today a guest who's going to continue that conversation. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Ryan Annis, who's the Housing Director here at Sasebo. So welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you, Chaps. Good morning.
First, just tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background?
So background, as you said, currently I'm the Housing Director here at CFAS. And prior to that, I've been in Sasebo since 2009 as an active duty Navy, retired out of here in 2019, about a year ago, as the CFAS Chief Staff Officer.
Okay, awesome. So you've been in Sasebo, been in Japan for a hot minute. You kind of know the area, know the people, know the ships, know the tempo, which is a great way to talk about resiliency. You know, how does our force, as families, as service members, how are they affected by some of the things that are going on around us? How do they deal with those? So I guess first, how would you define resiliency? What does that look like to you?
So to me, resiliency is the ability to become stronger after dealing with the many challenges that life throws at us. Whether it be, during this COVID-19 pandemic or just general life. Life has challenges, life has, great times, setbacks, all that. And to me, resiliency is the ability to deal with those challenges and how you recover and become stronger, hopefully, after each one of those successes or setbacks, whether it be a strong success or, occasionally we are not as successful as we'd like to be. And resiliency is how we recover from that and hopefully become stronger once we're through that particular challenge.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, resiliency is all about bouncing back and learning and becoming better, stronger from whatever experience kind of stretched us or pushed us. What are some of the resiliency issues that you saw here in your time on active duty? What are some of the resiliency issues that you see as the housing director with both families and service members?
Well, speaking to right now is the focus on COVID and my position as the housing director. I'd like to focus on that because a lot of it can relate back to things I've seen all on active duty, but now we're kind of in this time that we're in. So in the housing world, what I see, I see folks coming into Sasebo probably at one of the, even outside of the COVID environment, most challenging times, not in their life, not quite that bad, but a very difficult time, especially folks moving with families or young sailors, first time overseas or first duty station away from home. Just that PCS process is always a challenge. And now we couple that with 2 weeks of ROM, challenge finding, our military family housing occupancy is at, well over 90% right now. CHOs out in town, are also, we're limited with what we got available because of the environment that COVID had kind of placed us in, with people kind of being stuck here in Sasebo before they leave, so on and so forth. So that's all added and makes it that much larger of a challenge to what would otherwise be an already challenging time. So, and I see that from kind of day one as families get out of ROM and try to find a home for themselves and their family, whatever the case may be. And it's just a matter of how, again, kind of how you deal with those challenges, kind of head on, control what you can control, and become stronger from that. And definitely learned, especially during this COVID time, that patience and kind of seeing the long game is an absolute positive attribute to have when you're going through it.
I know for myself, when I came out here, this was my first overseas assignment, and so you're dealing with a lot of the unknown to begin with just overseas. But then one of the specific areas is where do I live? Where am I going to live? How does that work? How do I pay my bills? All the complexions of either base housing or out in town CHO housing, as you mentioned. And what are some of the common things that you hear or see that are stressors in the housing realm for people when they come here?
Initially, it's finding a home, whether it be on base. You may have to wait to get the home that fits your family dynamic, your family needs, or if you are able to, or the base doesn't have a family home for you if you're active duty, finding that place, and it's not like you're used to when you just go look for an apartment or a home when you're in the States. There's obviously, not obviously, but it's a different culture, so there's a different way of doing that, and some of the things that housing tries to help with is often seen as maybe adding further barriers to that process, but it truly is a way to protect our families and our sailors and make sure that they find safe, adequate, and affordable housing. But that does add something to the process. So transparency in the process and communicating very clearly with our customers and our residents on how the process works, and making them realize that there is a process here, and it does take time. In many cases, it can take a month, several months, in the longest cases. And again, being resilient and working through that process, and in the end, I'm confident that families will find a home that fits their needs, and they can enjoy the rest of their tour in Sasebo. It's just working through that initial first month or a couple months.
I think one of the great things, or I guess you could say comforts that I had when I was coming here and looking for housing is, not speaking the Japanese, not speaking the language, and you're working with realtors or individuals that are showing you housing or taking you to housing. You already know that the house I'm looking at, because it's been vetted through the housing department, it's a solid home. There's not going to be huge issues with it. I have somebody who's kind of got my back or can help me communicate with my landlord or the person that I'm leasing from, and that kind of takes some of the burden off of, or some of the stress off of, okay, I'm in a foreign country and kind of caught unawares in a lot of things, but I have a department that's going to support me and back me up and help me through that process. That kind of helps de-stress that situation. Do you see any differences between, for instance, someone who comes out here and they're by themselves, it's a single sailor, versus someone who brings a family with them?
Absolutely. I would say even beyond that, that's a very drastic difference. The challenge is that a single sailor looking for a home out in town, has a whole different set of challenges than a family of 4 or 5 or 6 with 2 dogs that comes out here. The problem set is much different. But I would say that's the extreme example. Every family has their own unique challenges. So where one could look at it, where for that single sailor that's out here just needs to find a true out in town, I say just and just a little bit. True, that might be easier in the sense that there's a lot more 2-bedroom, smaller homes available, but that single sailor, he or she is working on the ship or supporting the base or whatever they're doing, and is maybe not able to get to housing every day to look at the updated show board and so on and so forth, whereas that family has an entirely different problem set that's equally as challenging. Larger home, can I find a home that will take my cat or my dog or both? But they may have a support system in place, whether it be the spouse or whatever the case may be, to help them look and see when those homes become available. So one thing I've learned in the short time in the job here is that every family, every sailor is unique in the challenges they have in finding a place. And my staff is absolutely incredible at finding those differences. Some have been doing it for many, many years, at helping them find a home that's, again, safe, affordable, and adequate for each family, and say that's in Sasebo.
How has, because this has been a huge dynamic in my conversations with guests, but and just had a huge impact on our life and our world, but how has COVID-19 kind of changed or shaped the housing world, and has there been an impact with how sailors found housing or had housing issues pre-COVID-19 versus now kind of in the mix of COVID-19?
I think the largest impact that COVID has had on the process is it has highlighted or exacerbated some of the challenges that existed before. I mentioned earlier about the inventory of homes on the show board and in base housing. That was going to be a challenge in Sasebo. Regardless, it is a critical housing area. It not always has been, but it has been for many years, at least since I've been here. But with the COVID-19 and the things we've taken for that has kind of exacerbated that in the sense that people, as I mentioned earlier, people are here longer, either they're at their PCS time and they're trying to get out, we've obviously added 2 weeks to the whole process for ROM when you get here. So, and very little can be done to find your home, especially if you're looking for a place out in town during that ROM period. So that's basically 2 weeks added on top of that, month or 2 months in some cases before finding that home. So it's really just kind of highlighted some of the challenges that are with with the PCS process in general. But I would say the rest of it now, as we kind of transition to the new normal and normalizing the way we do operations, it's less to do with COVID-19, and we've just adapted our policies and procedures. Obviously, with where it used to be at 12 o'clock every day during the week, we'd have the masses come into the office and look at the show board. Now we have organized that a little bit more, so we give out numbers to the folks in the hallway, and they come in to maintain that 6-foot social distancing. Nothing changes as far as when you can look at the board. You're just not throwing elbows and working to get that next person in by the board. So in some ways, it's helped us to define our processes and make them a little better. That hopefully makes the process a little less stressful because we're more organized and able to accommodate people in the same ways, but maybe not in a little more comfortable way and definitely safer way in dealing with COVID-19, which, kind of back to what we're talking about with resiliency, speaks to that. It's how do we meet these challenges and hopefully become better, whether it be stronger or develop processes and procedures in place that will make the housing process better once we get through this COVID-19 pandemic.
I remember when I went through my housing brief, and they were saying that, once you complete AOB, once you complete your housing brief, and then you can go to the CHO board and start looking at places, a lot of emphasis on, kind of taking some personal responsibility and making sure I get there on time, making sure I prioritize houses. I know you can go online and look at some of the availability of houses so that when you get to the board, you kind of have an idea of all right, this is what I'm looking for. Maybe this house is posted here. But what are some of the things when people encounter problems with their housing? Leaky faucet, damaged tiles on the roof after a typhoon, any number of things that are kind of wear and tear issues. How do they go about seeking help for those, getting resolution? What's kind of the process for that?
So it's two distinct ways of doing that. One, it's handled differently for a resident living in a CHO, off-base housing, vice military family housing on base. So for the CHO residents, when they sign their lease, they're given a English point of contact, and that is the person who they would call, contact with any issues with the home. Most realtors have their own English point of contact through that agency, but in some cases it's GI Bill pay, but not always. It's not the default. That's just whoever that realtor that you got your home through chose to use as their English point of contact, and that's their main primary point of contact that they'll call first. Obviously, as the name implies, English point of contact, as you alluded to earlier, Chaps. One of the things we do to help is make sure that you've got that way to state your problem to somebody that speaks English, and then we start working from there. For the residents in military family housing, we've got the Public Works Trouble Desk that they call when they have a maintenance issue or an issue with their home. And that starts that process. If it's an emergency, they get out there right quick. But not all maintenance issues with homes are emergencies. And by emergency, we're talking about something that they would call somebody in on overtime or over the weekend for. But if it's not that, then they'll get in there the next business day or two to address your concern. And the numbers for both the trouble desks, there's a trouble desk in Hario and a trouble desk number for main base, are in the resident handbook. 252-8080, I believe, is one of them, and 3535 is the other one.
Yeah. My roof fell off in a typhoon is a much different emergency priority than my faucet's leaking.
Indeed.
So it always helps if you can prioritize them a little bit. We talked a lot about, people coming to Sasebo, PCSing in, looking for housing. But what are maybe some of the things that they have to think about as they're getting ready to leave Sasebo and PCS to another command, back to the States, kind of winding down that time? Are there things in housing that they've got to start tracking on? Mm-hmm.
And again, the process will be slightly different whether they're in family housing or in a CHO. Fortunately, for both CHO residents and family housing, we're either active duty here in Sasebo or most people are with the government, as a GS employee or something to that effect. So we've got relationships with the realtors in town, and by the lease, we don't have to give them, like in the States, you might see like a year notice or a month notice or whatever the case is to vacate. So your intent to vacate, you start setting that up. Either way, whether you're on base or off base, I should have started with this. start with the phone call to housing, and we'll point you in the right direction either way, whether it be an intent to vacate for your home on base and family housing, and then your subsequent, pre-inspection and final inspection to get out and setting up your household goods and all that, or with your off base, similar process. We'll go through your off base counselor to notify your realtor and set up the same kind of things where once you're out, they'll do their final inspection. Hopefully get your security out, all your security deposit back, all that good stuff. And then parallel with that is working through personal property, which is not part of housing, to set up your household goods shipment and all that kind of stuff to get on and start that whole PCS inbound process all over again someplace else.
And you probably don't want to wait until like the last week or month before you're PCSing. Probably the farther advanced that you can give notice and start that, the better off you end up being in terms of being able to work with the various entities that are involved in your move and so forth. So any final things that you want to share about kind of a housing department or how housing can help us with the resiliency issue?
Well, I guess to close it on for what housing can do to help is again, as I alluded to earlier, I've got an incredible staff, both behind the scenes in my warehouse that manages all the inventory of washers, dryers, various appliances, furniture, all that. And then also your off-base counselors, on-base counselors, my inspectors, all those folks that, many have been doing this for not just years, but in some cases a decade or more, decades. So a wealth of experience on the team, and we're here to do one thing, and that's support our families and our sailors and enable the fleet get the mission done. I fully understand that there's always constraints with that, and with anything there's a process, and we're helping so many folks. There becomes it's a process, and it can get frustrating. But we are absolutely here to work with you as best we can and make those challenges as easy to get through and recover from and become more resilient as possible. And some of that balance, is thinking about things that, as I was kind of preparing for this interview, one of the things I wanted to bring up was, the resiliency that myself and our folks on my staff go through is balancing, the immediate need of taking care of our customers, the current residents, which is first and foremost the most important thing, but can't be done in a vacuum. There's also we've got to plan for the future and maintain our housing infrastructure for CFAS going, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 years down the line. And some of that requires inconveniencing current residents, in things such as transformer replacements or repainting or energy upgrades and that sort of thing. So while extremely inconvenient, and I do empathize with our residents that have their lives impacted, and there is a lot going on in Hario right now, especially to make these housing units better going into the future. And that can be difficult and definitely inconvenient for folks. So I do ask that you kind of, bear with us as we work through this. We do our best to coordinate with, usually through NAVFAC, to make it as, easy to take as possible, but it's sometimes there's just no real good time to have a power outage in your home for 8 hours at a time. There's, so please bear with us as we work through that. And if you have any issues, please contact our office. And as far as resiliency goes, I think just like I said earlier, is how we recover from these challenges in life is that life throws at us on a daily basis. Is resiliency. I actually just, as a kind of a closing note, I was having a conversation with my daughter last week and was trying to explain resiliency to her. And the analogy I used is PT, specifically weightlifting, right? You're actually damaging your muscles when you go to the gym and you work out and you get the little tears and it hurts. Hopefully not permanently if you're doing it right, but over the next few days, as that muscle recovers, it recovers stronger. And to me, that's what resiliency is, whether it be at the gym or in your own personal life with emotions and all that kind of thing. And the more we do that, and the more we overcome challenges and become stronger, the better we become as people, and the more stronger we get stronger to be able to handle further adversity, because who knows what's coming next. So, yeah. So kind of wrap up what I said about resilience. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Ryan, and I appreciate it and thank all of the sailors, the families, the service members, both here in Sasebo and throughout Navy Region Japan, for all of your continued resiliency during COVID-19 and during some of the difficult times that we've had. But we're doing great. So thank you again. This is Chaplain Lawrence signing off this week's episode of Taps with Chaps, and we'll see you next week. Take care.